When you've lost Jen Psaki. There was an over-listening to and an over-lifting up of people who left Trump, not people who left the Democratic Party. The people who left Trump, the never-Trumpers who have important voices. That is not the winning coalition. True!
There is sexism.
Wait, hold on. Give me this panel. This is what I want to be listening to. Give me some damn common sense. MSNBC. Psaki, I'll take back everything negative I ever said about you, okay? Hit me with the good, okay? Hit me with that high-quality analysis. Okay, I assume it's this. I assume it's this panel. What does the panel comp look like? 6? Okay, yeah, this is it.
You know, we've had a lot of interesting conversations, Lauren, and we will more about how the Democrats fell short, what happened, where Democrats need to dig deep and regroup. But moving forward...
You said she was preferable to every other Biden spokesperson? Oh, yeah, I mean, I certainly like her more than the current lady. You know, I mean, I've still criticized her, but yeah, she's definitely better.
What does the fight for women look like now for women's rights, women's health care, women's freedom, and that within how the Democratic Party moves forward?
Yeah, well, there were silver linings in Tuesday's results. I mean, 7 states passed abortion referendums, even where they voted for Trump in those same states, which, you know, we had talked about before and sort of like scratched our head, like, could that happen?
It actually shows that tangible issues did break through.
Absolutely.
And so when you're talking about fascism and autocracy and these issues that are too difficult to comprehend when you're working every day and you're not, it doesn't impact you. It's the tangible issues, how women were impacted physically by Trump's first term, and then the price of, you know, eggs.
Right. I mean, there's always been this conventional wisdom that sometimes when people think someone's going to win, they'll like vote, you know, they vote for a president of one party and then try to check their power by voting for...
I don't think there's anything wrong with making the Trump is a fascist bit like a hard line on the campaign messaging. I just think it's a weakness in the messaging, you know? People don't want to just vote against the other guy. They want to vote for you. And it's not enough to just say that about the other person, you know?
Electeds. In this case, it seems like voters did that with those referendums, right? The referendums, in a sense, like a check on whatever Trump might do or what his party might do to push.
The problem is 80% of voters don't know what fascism even means. Just say it over and over. Who cares if they know what it means? Just say it over and over. Say lots of stuff. Fascist, rapist, pedophile. Just layer it all. Just who cares? Like, who cares? It's not untrue. You don't have to lie. Just hit it with it over and over and over again. Fascist. That means he wants control over your body. Fascist. That means he wants you to die in foreign wars. Fascist. I mean, just tell them. If they don't know what it means, tell them. Scream it from the rooftops. Saturate the airwaves. All media, all the time. Never stop, never slow down.
Further abortion restrictions. And I think we're going to keep seeing those. I mean, the battle for America, and I've been saying this here for years, is through the states. I mean, many of the state legislatures hold the keys to American freedoms. And I think people are newly understanding that in different ways. Notably in Pennsylvania, you know, where we had this shocking, you know, sort of sweep, Bob Casey losing, you know, all of this. The Pennsylvania state legislature remained Democratic, and that just was called last night. So
that race with Casey is not called,
and it's not
NBC
called.
Yet,
but
I hear it. You know, I don't think they thought it was going to be close.
They didn't.
Female voters did come out in larger numbers, but not by as much as the Democrats wanted. And white women and white men both voted pretty overwhelmingly for Trump. It was mostly black women who, like, black men were like 83-17, black women were like 92-8, and Latin women, I think, were like 20 points more to Kamala than Latin men were, maybe 25 points, something like that. Something in that ballpark.
I think I was reading closely. Yeah. Fair enough that it's not called. Several races that are still not called. Look, I wanted to say this because I've been thinking about it so much this week that I think really the dividing line, I've been wrong about a bunch of things, and I think we're all...
I might be wrong on this, but as a Hispanic, I feel like the lowering of votes for Democrats by Latinos could be explained by the fact that Democrats abandoned them. Harris never gave anything to humanize people immigrating to the U.S. Democrats have never really given a shit about messaging to Hispanic people because the Democrats are run by consultants out of New York City, and New York City is mostly about, like, black and white people. Obviously, I'm simplifying massively, but the racial dynamic in in cities on the East Coast is a lot more like ingrained and old, whereas if you go to Los Angeles or Seattle or San Francisco, there's a lot more like right now, like Los Angeles is like half Mexicans, you know? Go to Koreatown, you know? In the consultant class, their understanding of like how racial politics, racial dynamics work is still rooted in like a Clintonite perspective. When Hispanics were somewhat less relevant to the electorate, Asian people were as well, and it was largely about like black people vote Democrat and white people are a toss-up. They haven't adapted at all to the new world, the new messaging, the new style, you know? How'd Asians vote? Mostly for the left. Also, the idea that immigrants will vote in the interest of future immigrants is delusional and doesn't happen that often. Why would you assume that? They came from a shittier country to arrive in ours. They came from shitty situation to live in our country. They want to escape their country. That's why they're migrants. They left there to come here. They don't want more of there to come here. They're wrong to believe that. But they want that's just how people are. They want to kick the ladder once they've used it. You have to assume that, and you have to make accommodations based on that. You have to work around that, work into that. Don't assume people will always vote in their racial interest.
Kind of taking stock of what we got wrong. I think the numbers turned out that women, of course, did vote for Trump in huge numbers, but really, like the big dividing line, these gender lines are very real, but so is the education divide. And I think that's one of these places where Democrats, to me, it's less about the working class, not working class, and more about education and the fact that college is not accessible for millions of Americans, and yet we set that up as the ultimate bar of success. And then
same with home ownership.
Well, home ownership, but you know what happened on college campuses this year?
This is also true. Democrats literally like don't listen. Democrats only listen to college educated people in their consultant groups, and if they ever step outside of that, it's like manufacturing union jobs because they think that's what the working class is today, when 10% of people are in a union or something. The Democrats don't really care about or listen to messaging from just like random dumb Americans, because if they did, they would have no idea what to do with the like jarring, dissonant, inconsistent, like frankly low IQ bullshit they would hear. And because that doesn't fit in with their consultancy bias, they don't engage with it, you know? They would understand the value of populism if they did.
I mean, think about that. You can't, so you're supposed to want me to aspire to this thing I can't afford that's $90,000 a year, and then I'm going to get there and I'm going to have to deal.
Union workers are relatively rich anyway, right? True. That's literally true. Yeah. If you're working with the UAW, you're still working class, but you're a hell of a lot better off than like basically anyone living in rural America or anyone in like working a barista job or a service worker job. Of course, obviously, yeah, you're in a union. You're not at the lower end of you're in all likelihood, you're probably making significantly more than like the people at like the lowest low economically, you know?
Deal with like this crazy sort of backlash to dissent, you know, I think all of that is part of the factors here, but we got to figure out what happened, why the men in this country are so angry and so willing to sign on for something that is against the interests of the women in their lives.
Jen Psaki, your thoughts?
I mean, I think I've also been reflecting on all of the things that the party got wrong. And I think it's an important moment to reflect and be humble about that and also be curious as to why. And, you know, I think one of the things that Lauren just mentioned and you just responded to, Mika, we completely misread abortion politics in this country. And what I mean by that is not that it isn't an issue that people deeply care about. They clearly do. Obviously, those 7 referendum are an example of that. But millions of people in this country voted for Donald Trump, a person who put in place the people on the Supreme Court who overturned abortion rights and also voted to protect abortion rights. That was a huge misread. The other thing I think that Democrats and people who voted for Harris and are scared about Trump.
One of these days, like Democrats have to reconcile with and analyze and process the fact that all of their policies are more popular than Republicans' policies, even to Republicans, as long as Republicans don't know their Democrat policies. That time and time again, people vote left on referendums and constitutional amendments, and then when the actual candidates come out, they don't vote for Democrats. And there's literally no explanation for this other than policy not mattering as much as Democrats think it does. Because when it's just the policy being voted on, people vote left. Overwhelmingly, they vote left. But a politician isn't a policy. A politician is a part of a movement. There's something larger than that. They represent something. They're a representative of a party, of an ideology. They're not just a single policy. Narrative is what matters there.
should just be sober about and curious about is not just why did people move toward Trump, but why did Democrats and people who had been with the party for some time not come out and turn out for Kamala Harris and not turn out for the Democrats? There were many headwinds here. There is sexism. There's racism.
Can you explain why voters voted right in so many referendums this year? They didn't. Didn't Missouri vote to protect abortion rights? Florida voted 58-42. The only reason that massive disparity didn't count as a success is because Florida has a stupid 60% threshold for its referendums because they hate state democracy over there. Californians despise criminals and homeless, and I'm not going to lie, having lived in California, that's the fault of local Democrat governance. Yeah, the reason why there are so many like break-ins, shoplifting. I parked my car in San Francisco for 20 minutes once to go to a bakery. When I came back, the rental that I was using had its fucking window broken into. Every time I've had my window broken into. It's insane. People leave their fucking windows rolled down so nobody feels the need to break them to look inside the car to ruffle around for stuff. It's fucking psychotic. And why? Local civic governance failures. Democrats that up for themselves too. Trust me, Democrats may be Hitlerite when it comes to like criminals, homelessness, theft, whatever else, but they weren't made Hitlerites in a vacuum. They were made Hitlerites because of massive social issues that local democratic governance not only like fails to deal with, but exacerbates massively. Yeah, neoliberalism and austerity. Rolling your windows down is crazy. Would you believe me if I told you it's not even that uncommon? I'm not kidding. Go to like a mixed zoned area in San Francisco, a place where there's a lot of obvious poverty. Check the cars that are parked in the street. You will see a decent number of them have their windows rolled down. Question on that, are Republicans any better at running cities? No. No. California Democrats at a local level are uniquely bad at this, though. Like, because of the housing crisis mostly. It largely stems from, like, land cost and so on. California could have a population of, like, 55 million right now if they had, like, invested appropriately in transportation, infrastructure, and housing.
All of that is true. But I also think there is a real question I hope people start looking at about who people are listening to. In my view, there was an over-listening to and an over-lifting up of people who left Trump, not people who left the Democratic Party.
So true.
The people who left the Democratic Party are the people who are going to win in the future. The people who left Trump, the never-Trumpers who have important voices and that is not the winning coalition. And yeah,
because there were like none of them. It was an entirely overstated demographic. All the fucking Lincoln Project guys, the neocons, got to like coast off their donations or whatever. They had their fun. How much do you even see this demographic like day to day in real life? Like how much of an active propped up social presence do like rhino Republicans have? None. Literally none, dude. It's not real.
I think that is a takeaway. And the last thing I'll say, because I've been thinking about this a lot, is the part of that piece, the who you're listening to, is also this argument, you just touched on this, Mika, about fascism. Fascism and the threat of democracy is a huge issue in this country. It's one that should be talked about. Journalists should talk about it. People should dig into it. It is not a good closing message to reach to the masses of the country.
It's true that it's not a good closing message. My mom is a never Trump Republican, but she just didn't vote instead of voting for Kamala. Yeah, why would the Democratic Party ever assume that neocons would vote for Kamala Harris? Like, the whole premise falls apart in like 1 nanosecond if you think about it. Like, wouldn't they just not vote? Is this really the demographic you want to target? Is this the best you can do? Like 75-year-old neocons?
People don't relate to it. It's not understandable. And I think that, I hope, is a lesson. But okay, I said that was the last thing. There's a last thing because I've thought about this a lot.
I want to know.
Is this. There are moments, I know Joe was talking about this earlier. I worked for John Kerry when he lost to President Bush. That was a real, how did that happen moment. I then worked for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee the next cycle for Rahm Emanuel when the Democrats won back the House, right? That was 2 years later. And then I worked for Barack Obama, who no one would have bet was going to be the next nominee or the next president after George W. Bush. As dark as people feel, as fearful as people feel, as lost as they feel, a vacuum is also an opportunity to rethink, to listen, to be
Jen Psaki, chaos is a ladder. I agree.
Curious, to be humble. And I think in this darkness people are feeling, I'm hopeful that's part of it. Someone's going to emerge. 10 people will emerge. That's what we will also see in the months ahead.
I love what you just said, because I'm a huge believer in humility, in victory, and humility in defeat.
Yeah.
In both cases, we've all heard this.
Also, lib media is so soft on Trump. Meanwhile, conservatives are consistently attacking Kamala in the same points. Hot take, but also I'm completely correct. And if you disagree, you're wrong. You know what motivates you to say that another person is wrong over and over, even when it gets boring, even when it gets tiring? Contempt. And the liberals can't feel contempt because it breaks with civility. The tone of conservatives constantly covering and making up the failures of Biden and Kamala, it's not them just like neutrally reporting on it or repeating the same points over and over and over again in like a, oh, well, here you go, here's the information tone. They treat it as it is, entertainment. You're supposed to feel contempt. You're supposed to hate them. You're supposed to think they're stupid. And liberal media will never be able to do this to Republicans, will never be able to maintain that level of consistent messaging unless they can do this as well. And you should have contempt for them, by the way. Like, obviously. Why wouldn't you? Do I need to make a case for that? Contempt motivates people. And also, contempt isn't necessarily undeserved. Obviously.
Saying you're never as good as people say you are, or never as bad as people say you are. So when you win, I will say, if Harris had won the race, I would be lecturing Democrats that they needed to be humble. They needed to keep their heads down. They needed to bring the country together. In defeat, humility to say, how did we get so disconnected?
Joe's such a retard. Joe Scarborough is literally like one of the main reasons we are where we are. Didn't like Joe Biden listen to this guy like every day? It's like the feedback loop of stupid, airheaded, like low IQ coastal elite, never moved left but kowtow to the right bullshit. Like he's fully like he's a literal conservative ex-Republican. So yeah, of course he props up the never Trumpers, or had. He was a Republican. I know he was a Republican congressman.
But Jen, I want to follow up on something you said, because what Democrats need to be asking is, why did so many people?
Because these are the people that Democrats listen to. These are the people. It's a dead ideology listening to the adherents of another dead ideology, neo-libs and neo-cons, you know? Clinging on to each other, wondering why they're not relevant anymore.
Stay home and not vote. Get two numbers. First number is 12 million less people voted for Kamala Harris than Joe Biden. But here's the kicker. Are you ready for this? Donald Trump got 4 million votes less, Jen. 4 million votes less.
That's not the kicker. That's not even interesting. Also, it looks like he might catch up to the previous number. I don't even think it's 4 million less at this point.
This year than he got 4 years ago. If Democrats had turned out, and independents and Republicans, if they had a message, and by the way, this is...
Again, he's already sowing the seeds of our next defeat. And independents and Republicans. That's what we need, guys. You know, the problem with Kamala Harris's campaign is she didn't actually campaign with Liz Cheney enough. Liz Cheney, a person who, and I promise you this is true, a lot of people like.
So, I'm going to say it right here. This is such a shared defeat. Anybody looking at Kamala Harris?
Unimaginable cope. Massive defeat from Donald Trump. All he did was campaign miserably, do 50 flubs, and now he might get the tragic loss of having basically the same vote count as last time. While his opponent, Kamala Harris, who ran a fairly competent campaign, tripped and burned and exploded.
Are Jen O'Malley Dillon or David Plouffe are looking in the wrong direction. They need to look in the mirror and look at the Democratic Party that has been offending working class Americans for 30 years now, running them off for 30 years now. And Jen, how shocking is it that, again, Donald Trump got 4 million votes less And now Democrats are going, oh my gosh, this is the greatest landslide of all time. How did it happen? It happened because they stayed home, because a lot of voters that voted for her last time stayed home. We can look, forgive me.
Why? Why did they stay home? Is it possible that you belong to a class of media elites and consultants who are completely fucking removed from the needs of the people and have no idea what they're talking about? Literally no idea. Like, absolutely none. Zero clue. Like, you have no relationship at all. The average Fox News consultant has an infinitely better understanding, has their fingers way closer to the pulse of the American heartbeat than you do. It would be difficult to imagine a person less capable of analyzing this election result than you.
For going on, but this is an important point. We can look at Hispanics and go, oh my God, how many Hispanics voted?
Why is it taking him so long to get his bullshit point across? Because Joe Scarborough is low IQ. He's stupid. He's a stupid man. It's evident in everything he says, both in his points and delivery. He's not an intelligent person. He's dumb. He's low IQ. The only reason he's been propped up to this point is because he's a never Trump a Republican. That's it. Because Democrats love this myth, this narrative of like Republicans seeing sense and moving over to the left purely on the basis of the superior policy making of the Democrats. It's like a lovely fantasy they lull themselves to sleep with. So they prop up every single example of it happening. Liz Cheney, this, countless, honestly, though if I tried to list them, I would stop right now at Joe Scarborough and Liz Cheney because I have a really bad memory. But we could look through them later if you wanted. They're obsessed with it. But these people don't exist in real life.
For Donald Trump. And oh my God, how many black men voted for Donald Trump? He still got 4 million less votes in 2024 than he got in 2020.
Who cares?
So they could have easily.
This is like losing a tennis match to a guy with the flu, and then later you're like, well, he was a lot slower on that serve. That's embarrassing for him, and you just lost. Like,
made that up, but they didn't come out and vote in what many of us thought was the most important election of our lifetime.
No doubt. I will just say, just for people who are hyperventilating at home, and a hyperventilation a little bit is good in this moment, all the votes are not counted yet, so those gaps will narrow a bit. But I think, Joe, and for anybody out there who's going to say there were...
Oh, by the way, what he's saying about the popular vote, he's wrong. Completely wrong. As of current count, Donald Trump, 74 million votes back in 2020. In 2024 now, he's up to 73.4, with votes still being counted. Donald Trump's vote total is going to exceed what it was back in 2020. They're just not done tabulating all the votes. Kind of embarrassing that he would say this, by the way. Joe Scarborough is supposed to be this like plugged in, like, you know, legacy media veteran. And yet the count of Donald Trump's vote count being 4 million lower than it was in 2020, that's from election night. It's been 3 days. This segment was posted today. Has he not read up on it? Has he not like was he not aware of the fact that they were continuing the vote count? Is he seriously using 3-day-old information now? For reference about how neocons are dead, Joe Scarborough's seat is currently held by Matt Gaetz. No shit? Is it the same seat? That's funny. Let's take political advice from the guy who, if he ran in the same seat over again, would get like 0.4% of the vote and would lose to a pedophile sex trafficker like Beavis and Butthead cosplayer, you know?
Headwinds there were, right? Kamala Harris made up a lot of ground that wouldn't have been the case a couple of months ago if there hadn't been a change at the top of the ticket. But I think your point is exactly the one people should be thinking about here. This was not a vote because Donald Trump has won over 10 million more votes than he did 4 years ago. There were people who did not feel moved, motivated, connected to the Democratic Party. And I've seen, and you played a lot of these people just a few minutes ago, there's a lot of diagnosing out there of what happened here. It's too progressive. It's too this. It's too that. Woke this and that. Look, everybody needs to be a little bit more humble than all of those diagnoses right now, because young people didn't turn out.
Jen Psaki's cooking, actually. She's basically saying if you're part of the Democrat like consultant class, you're a retard. You've been proven wrong and you should shut the fuck up. You've been proven wrong on every level.
Progressives didn't turn out. People who maybe should have found it to be appealing, the messaging that is left-leaning, as some of those critics are saying. And to me, what is most appealing to me are the elected officials, the governors, people who are saying, we have to start listening to what people are saying. Why do they feel disconnected? Why can't the party that has the policies that should help working people, help non-college educated voters, not connect? It's not a problem with the product necessarily. It's a problem with how it is being sold. It is a problem with how it's being connected. And the other thing is, look, I'm a college-educated white woman, clearly, right? The message is geared too much toward me. Mm-hmm. It is geared toward me. It is not geared toward a mass of the public. And that is a moment to really be clear-eyed about. I do think, though, for people who were feeling hopeless and powerless in this moment.
He hates this right now. He hates this shit so much.
You are not powerless. And that's why I wanted to mention the working when the Democrats flipped the House in 2006, when Barack Obama emerged. You're not powerless. When Donald Trump was elected, he said he was going to get rid of the ACA. You know what happened? People got active. They called their members of Congress. They went to meetings. They said, absolutely not. You cannot take away my health insurance. And guess what? It didn't happen. Every fight will not be won, but nobody's powerless sitting on their couch right now. There is a lot to happen. There's a lot of people to get excited about. There are people who are going to emerge we're not even talking about right now. So as much as there needs to be reflection, there is also power in this moment too.
I'm sad this clip didn't include like Joe Scarborough physically assaulting her afterwards, because it would have been really funny to see him like stumble. Also, I know they're not in the same studio. Yeah, it's Biden's campaign team should never be allowed to work in politics again. Donald's mild demeanor can be misleading. Like Biden, he has firm beliefs about politics, the public, the press, and a contrarian side. In 2020, he and his campaign team had to decide whether to emphasize the economy or the more abstract idea that Trump imperiled the essence of America. We bet on the latter, Donilon said, even though, quote, our old pollsters told us that talking about the soul of the nation was nutty. Might have taken that advice 4 years ago. That experience fortified his belief that this year's campaign should center on what he calls the freedom agenda. By November, he predicted the focus will... Like, this is how bad Dem consultants are. They will literally ignore info from the ground. They will they have like a set of heuristics and principles that they will refer to even when all evidence contradicts it. By November, he predicted the focus will become overwhelmingly on democracy. I think the biggest images in people's minds are going to be of January 6th. One of the most striking elements of the still preliminary exit poll result is that a plurality of Americans, nearly 4 in 10, say democracy is very threatened. Most voted for Trump. Astounding. I was wrong on that too. I didn't think most of them would vote for Trump. I had the opposite call on election night. Tell you though, I wouldn't have made this call. I wouldn't have had a bunch of pollsters come up to me and say, hey, Americans don't give a shit if you talk about saving the soul of the nation, and then say, nah, they're probably fucking wrong. Actually, me and my, like, you know, Harvard-educated New York brunch-having, slightly left-of-center Wall Street Democrats have the right idea on what 350 million Americans want to hear.